Tov everyone. Parsha Bahar introduces us to the concept of Yovel. Shnas Chamishim Shana. The 50th year is a year of Yovel. There are a number of main ideas that the Yovel teaches us. One is that the Yovel is like a super Shemitah, in which the ground is not tilled. Everything is, so to speak, hefker. The ownership of human beings is removed. And one relies on the sustenance that heaven provides for everyone. Regarding Shemitah, for instance, I discussed with you last week that there's a matter of Shemitah Ksafim, that Shemitah cancels debts. And the Torah warns that that the nature of people will be, and the Torah calls it Dover Blial, which is a very strong expression in Torah. Literally, it means undisciplined, but it's more than that, evil. That people will say it's going to be Shemitah, and Yosef comes and he wants a loan from me, and I'm afraid to give him the loan because the Shemitah will arrive and cancel the debt. So in effect, I'm throwing my money out. So the Torah warned us not to have that attitude. However, we see from the Gemara in Gittin that attitude was so strong that in order to preserve Shemitah, the concept of Shemitah, the rabbis had to institute what they called the Prusbul. The Prusbul is a document which provides a technical loophole, because Shemitah Ksofim al pi halacha is only between individuals. And if a person owes money to an entity, let's say to Bezdin, then the loan is not canceled. And therefore, the Prusbul was an effective way of taking private loans, personal loans, and transferring them to the Bet Din, so that, so to speak, the Bet Din would enforce the loan. And then as a matter of equity, the Bet Din would give the money to the person that lent it. Hillel Tiken Prusbul, the Gemara says. Hillel Azoken, so we're talking about an institution from the year 30 before the Common Era, which is the year of Hillel. Obviously, that's a subterfuge. It's a way out. It's not the intent of the Torah. But there are certain realities that Chazal faced, that in order to preserve the idea of Shemitah, we have to circumvent it. that people would at least remember to make a prusbul. They remembered to make a prusbul, so then Shemitah was still preserved as an institution. And then we will see when things improve in the Jewish world, how we will be able to get back on the original track. And that's the situation today. To machlokas in the poskim, whether the prusbul has to be effectuated before the Shemitah or at the end of the Shemitah. Most of the poskim are of the opinion that we do it right before the Shemitah leaves us. So in this month of Elul, Abu Aleinu L'Tova, so then we will write a prusbul for those who need it and assign it, the Rabbanut will assign it to its high Bezdin, and that is how it will be commemorated. Now, if we think of Yovel, so first of all, pretty much an historical fact that the Yovel never really was observed in Jewish history. The time of the Bayis Rishon, the Gemara says that the 70 years of exile were for the 70 years of Yovel that never were observed during that period of time. In the Bayis Sheni, since most of the Jewish population did not live in Eretz Israel, most of the Jews lived in the Mediterranean area, the Near East, in Iraq, in Bavel, in Egypt, later in North Africa. So since it never was Rov Yoshveh Oleho, the most of the Jewish world did not exist in Eretz Israel. So therefore, the Yovel was not observed in Second Temple times either. When we went into exile, it certainly was not observed. So you have a mitzvah min Torah that in practical terms, we have no experience with. We have no way of knowing how it would have been handled. We see from Shemitah that the rabbis devised some sort of technicality in order to exist with the Shemitah. And we see that Shemitah is preserved. Even Shemitah's Karka in Eretz Israel. There are many agricultural settlements that observe Shemitah literally as the way it's written in the Torah. They don't plant, they don't harvest. And even those that are not in the farming business, we are careful as to what produce to buy, even what flowers to buy. So Shemitah remains as a living thing, so to speak. The practical matter every 7 years. The real problem of Shemitah probably is always the beginning of the 8th year, when the fruits that came into being in the 7th year, then they become the problem. For instance, the etrog and other things that, God willing, we'll have a chance to discuss when the time comes. But the idea that that you do not sell property on a permanent basis. Now that's pretty foreign to the Western mind. And real estate is real estate. And, you know, if it's recorded in the recorder's office and I paid for it and it's mine, so it's mine. Yovel requires that it be returned. Now, there are different types of real estate that the Torah outlines. There's real estate that is open fields, agriculture, etc. And then there's real estate that's called Botei Orei Choma, buildings that exist in a city that has a wall. Question is it having a wall the way we discussed by Purim? That it had a wall from Yeshua ben Nun? Or is that just a general statement that it has boundaries that are defined, that this is what we call city limits in the United States? We had an English rabbi over Shabbos, so we have to restore the equilibrium here. So it's the city limit. If you have an apartment, as many of us do, let's say, so that doesn't go back in Yovel. That there is a din that for 12 months, the sale is, so to speak, optional. The seller has a right to repurchase the property within the 12-month period. Once that period passes and the property has not been redeemed, not been bought back, so then the property remains with the buyer forever. So you have this odd combination of different types of real estate. Now, what about real estate that's owned by the government, by the state? Is there such a concept in halacha? Eretz Yisrael was divided amongst the 12 tribes, and the tribes divided it among its constituent members. So there was no public property. It was only the property of this tribe and this family and this person in the family. However, in our time, there is definitely a concept of public property. And in fact, here in Eretz Yisrael, the government still owns most of the property. So what would happen in terms of the Yovel? Now, there's an entire literature about what would happen if the Yovel, im yiyeh Yovel, it says in the Torah, if the Yovel will come. And so the question, there are Meforshim that say it means if, it may never come. We may never have, again, so then this would be drosh v'kabel schar. We learn the halachas, but in the real world, nothing happens. There are others that say chas v'sholem. Certainly will be a Yovel. So Rabbi Michael Epstein, the author of the Aruch HaShulchan, wrote a marvelous sefer called the Aruch HaShulchan Ha'atid, the future Aruch HaShulchan, on dinim that are noeg in Eretz Yisrael. He wrote this in the 1800s when there was no Jewish state. But he already foresaw that such a thing could happen. So what would be the halacha then? How would we deal with the Yovel then? And he has all sorts of interesting creative plans, so to speak, how we could observe the Yovel. In essence, the Yovel tells you that you're buying a leasehold, you're not buying property. You have a lease for 50 years. And when the lease expires, you're gone. There are many properties here in Jerusalem, especially, that are under leaseholds. Most of them from Christian churches which purchased these leaseholds from the Ottoman Empire in the 1800s. And the Israeli courts have held them to be legally effective. So you're only buying a leasehold. I remember I was a rabbi in Miami Beach. In Miami Beach, for some reason, a great percentage of the property and even of the major hotels were built only on leaseholds. So in America, it was common to have a 99-year leasehold. But the 99 years has passed. So then, if you built the Fontainebleau Hotel on a leasehold, which is what happened, and it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's the Ovel and the leasehold expires, what happens? So as a matter of practice in the United States, all the courts try to renew all leaseholds to try and make them as though they are permanent property. But what would be the din by the Yovel? We don't know. We don't know. And so the obvious intent of the Torah is to keep certain individuals or groups from owning everything, to prevent the oligarchs. So every 50 years, we reshuffle the deck. We start all over again. And whether or not that is economically viable is really one of the discussions in the Aruch HaShulchan Aruch as to how this matter would be treated. Just one more point that we really don't know the date of the Ovel. The date of the Shemitah is also in question, but there's a consensus regarding Shemitah, and we follow the opinion of the Gaonim of Bovel that this and this year was the Shemitah. So we were saying that the Tovshin Pei Beis was the Shemitah year, even though there are other opinions that it is not the Shemitah year. The suffix on the date allows already for many leniencies to exist, because who says that this is the Shemitah year? The Yovel is more complicated because there's a machlekes of Tanoim in the Mishnah and in the Gemara, whether or not the Yovel is the 50th year, and that 50th year becomes year one to the next Yovel, or whether it's the 50th year and the count for the next Yovel doesn't begin till the 51st year. And since we're talking over a period of thousands of years, it's a real question as to how we would be able to count it. So there are certain things that are left for future generations. We don't have to solve all the problems, but the emphasis that the Torah put on the mitzvah of the Yovel should at least interest us to study the matter and to see what the halacha says regarding it. Elchanan ben Akash Omer Rotza HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'zakas Yisrael Leficha Chibur Lahem Torah and Mitzvot Shenem Adonai Chavei Tzman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.